The member for Hotham.
I move that this bill be now read a second time.
Member for Hotham.
Speaker, one of the values that is most widely shared amongst Australians is that we care about animals. As parents, it's one of the first things that we teach our kids, that unnecessary cruelty to animals is simply wrong. Like most busy Australians, when I'm grabbing a new bottle of shampoo in the supermarket or rushing to put on my makeup in the morning, animal welfare isn't the first thing on my mind. But, Speaker, it probably should be. Every year, thousands of animals suffer tremendous pain and many die to make the cosmetics that sit on supermarket and chemist shelves around this country. In fact, today, the vast majority of ingredients that we see on those shelves have been tested on animals at some point in time. It's a practice that I, like 9 in 10 other Australians, think should be illegal. What Australians rightly expect is that instead of having to read the fine print of every item in the supermarket aisle, the law will simply reflect the fundamental belief that unnecessary cruelty to animals is wrong. Animal testing for cosmetics is unnecessary. It is wrong. And today the law doesn't reflect the ethics of the community, and I think that needs to change. Labor, along with the vast majority of Australians, shares the view that animals shouldn't have to suffer for better lipstick or moisturiser. And so today, Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce into the House the Ethical Cosmetics Bill that would have the precise effect of bringing those shared values into our law. The Ethical Cosmetics Bill would ban animal testing for cosmetics in Australia and ban the manufacture and importation of cosmetics that have been tested on animals elsewhere. Speaker, I want to outline the case for why Labor thinks the practice of animal testing for cosmetics should end. Speaker, in 2013, Labor's Deputy Leader and the member for Sydney, who's here with us in the chamber, who has been very passionately concerned about this issue for a long period of time, announced that Labor would conduct a national consultation into the importation and sale of cosmetics tested on animals. And throughout 2014, I worked very closely with the member for Throsby, who's the relevant Shadow Assistant Minister, to lead that consultation. Speaker, the response to this public consultation was really quite extraordinary. We received more than 14,000 submissions, and we spoke individually to hundreds and hundreds of Australians at public forums that were held in 6 locations around Australia. So what did we learn through the consultation process? Well, the first thing, Speaker, is that banning animal-tested cosmetics in Australia has massive community support. More than 90% of the submissions to this consultation argued that animal-tested cosmetics should be banned in Australia, and in fact, a lot of the people that we talked to were shocked that this is still actually occurring today. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting, Speaker, was that this ban is supported by a very wide range of Australians. It's not just people who have built their life with a passion for animal welfare and animal activism. We spoke to grandparents, to school children, to people from every walk of life who came to us saying that they believe this practice is wrong. And in fact, many of the people who talked to us through the consultation process told us that this was the first time that they'd ever participated in a policy development process in their lives. We consulted very widely with industry, Deputy Speaker, and due to that we're able to come to grips with a number of actually very genuine complications in legislating in this area, and I'll explain how our bill manages those complications. But one of the enduring refrains and one of the critical things that we want people at home to understand is that while this is a complex area of policy, these challenges have been overcome. They've been overcome in the entire European Union, which was a real trailblazer in banning animal-tested cosmetics in the past. And as we see, Speaker, around the world, countries are legislating for this or moving towards that new type of policy, which is very exciting to see. And I'd say as a final point on the consultation process, Deputy Speaker, that people were so energised to be a part of this. They wanted to see action now, and that is why Labor is taking this step of supporting me to introduce a private member's bill today. We think this has gone on for too long, and now is the time and now is the opportunity. Speaker, we actually heard quite a bit of detail about why animal testing is no longer necessary to prove that cosmetics are safe for human use, and I want to quickly touch on some of those reasons. First thing to note, Deputy Speaker, is that it's very clear that animal-tested cosmetics create incredible high degrees of pain for the animals that are being used for the testing. There are really awful practices that those at home can look up on the internet, but things like dripping very painful substances into the eyes of small animals, things like repeatedly putting irritating lotions on the skin to determine how long it is before really serious consequences occur. And we know, Deputy Speaker, that animals can't be anaesthetised in any way because that might interfere with the results. So we're really talking about a very cruel practice. We also heard, Deputy Speaker, a lot of scientists came to us and said, you know, there's actually no need for this anymore because we can provide better testing, more accurate testing of human response without using animals. There are lots of alternative tests. And again, Deputy Speaker, I'd point to the European Union as a jurisdiction where they've been able to put those into place. Deputy Speaker, the consultation pointed us to some difficulties of legislating in this area, and it's incredibly important that the public understand that while you should have the rightful expectation that the law should reflect your ethics, it's not always as straightforward as it sounds, and that's certainly the case with the regulation of cosmetics. In Australia, cosmetics are regulated as industrial chemicals, so they're not really designed to have specific rules applied just to them. Probably one of the most significant complications, Deputy Speaker, is that animal testing is not occurring in Australia today for cosmetic purposes. It's occurring a lot overseas, and of course it's very hard for the Australian Parliament to create laws that affect what goes on overseas. A final complication that I'll mention, Deputy Speaker, is this notion of dual purpose of testing. So one of the things that we learned through the consultation is that most ingredients that are used in cosmetics are actually used in many other substances and often in medicines. And what we want to do with this legislation is actually carve out that bit of testing that's happening purely for cosmetic reasons. And that's a complex thing to do, but something that I think we've managed to do in the Ethical Cosmetics Bill, which is before the House today. Speaker, the Ethical Cosmetics Bill bans and creates offences for testing cosmetics on animals within Australia. The bill bans and creates offences for importing into Australia any new cosmetics or existing cosmetics featuring new ingredients that have been tested on animals overseas. The bill before us is prospective only, Speaker, so that means that anything that's on the shelves of Priceline or Coles at the moment will continue to be there, and in fact we've given the regulator and industry a 3-year phase-in period in this bill so that new systems can be put in place and that the industry can come to terms with the new standards. Our bill amends the assessment process for new industrial chemicals which are intended to be used as a cosmetics. So what that means is now to apply for a new cosmetic ingredient to be registered in Australia, the regulator must be provided with a full list of the substance's animal test history. And for any live tests that are conducted, industry must bring forward the reasons why the test was conducted, and if the regulator believes that the dominant purpose for the testing being conducted is for that product's use as a cosmetic, then that product cannot be listed to be sold in Australia at all. Deputy Speaker, in addition to these measures, the regulator, NICNAS, can no longer accept any evidence from animal tests to support the registration of a new cosmetic ingredient. Speaker, the Ethical Cosmetics Bill is a piece of legislation that, for the first time in this parliament, genuinely grapples with the difficulties of legislating in this area. In 2014, a bill to ban animal testing was introduced in the other place, and I want to acknowledge Senator Rhiannon in moving that bill. But, Speaker, it was a piece of legislation that was manifestly inadequate. And if I can point to just a couple of issues, the current ICNA Act, which the Ethical Cosmetics Bill would seek to amend, actually requires animal testing in one of its schedules, yet the legislation put forward by the Greens made it an offence to test on animals. So, in essence, to comply with the law, you would have to be breaking the law. Clearly not a sustainable position for the industry. We also heard very clearly, Deputy Speaker, that no industry consultation was undertaken by the Greens, and in fact the peak body for cosmetics manufacturers in Australia didn't learn about the legislation until it was introduced into the Senate. And, Deputy Speaker, that's just not good policy making. We have to work with all of the stakeholders who are in this space if we want to get a deal that's actually going to properly work. And that's what Labor's done, Deputy Speaker. We've worked through a proper process. We didn't rush in some poorly thought through legislation. We methodically worked through the issues. And, Deputy Speaker, I want to make a quick final point on why this matters. Some people have said in the course of this consultation that this is not a very important issue. But I want to say to those people that if that is your view, I want to encourage you to get out there into your community and talk to people about what matters to them. Yes. So much of what we deal with within this parliament feels really esoteric to the people that we represent. This is not one of those issues. 90% of Australians want this to happen. We have the power to do something about it, and we have people on all sides of this parliament and chamber who believe it should be done. So, Speaker, I'm very glad to present the Ethical Cosmetics Bill to the House for consideration.
Thank the member for Hotham. This is the Ethical Cosmetics Bill. Is there a seconder to the motion presented by the member for Hotham?
With great enthusiasm, I second the motion and congratulate the member for Hotham for bringing